My name's Kris. I'm a certified high performance coach. I work with leaders who are ready to stop living like they are still in survival mode. And I go live every week and give you one good idea for the week ahead. And this week's new idea is unlearning. So I had a woman who came into the martial arts studio last week. She's been training in a different martial art than one I teach for about 10 years. And she was looking for a way to supplement her 2 day a week training someplace that was closer to home than the studio she normally trains in. So she was really excited to join the class. We had a good hard workout. At the end of class, she said, "Thank you. That was awesome. I learned a lot. It was really interesting, really good pace, fun class. And I don't think I'm coming back." And I said, "Okay, what made you say that?" And she said, "It's too different from what I already do. I would need to unlearn 10 years of practice in order to do this, and that's not what I'm looking for." And I really, really respect and appreciate that. I know exactly what she's talking about. I'm sure you can imagine. It's hard to learn to do two things, very similar things in completely different ways. That idea of unlearning has been bouncing around in my head. And I started thinking about how does that impact us in business and in the rest of our lives. And so the pattern that I see where I think unlearning could be really helpful is that we talk about our goals, and some of us are like, yeah, goals, they're there and I go for them, and doesn't matter how hard I work, something gets in the way. Like, you know what I mean? Like some people I know just get stuck and they feel really frustrated. I've had clients who have said to me, "I just need more discipline. I just need to do it. I just need to buckle down and commit. I just have to get the work done." And the truth is, the real problem, well, I'm getting a little ahead with the problem, but the real problem isn't a lack of discipline and it's not laziness. The pattern that I see is as we're working on our goals, we always have habits that are either going to move us toward our goals or away from our goals. Really simple example would be someone who wants to get in shape. Right? Every time you actually get up and do the workout you had planned, you're moving toward your goal. And every time you sleep through it, make an excuse, Netflix and chill, whatever it might be, you're not moving at all or you're moving away from your goal. Part of the problem that I see with people is that sometimes we have a season where we need to develop certain habits for safety. It might be, for example, with me, it was that brain injury, the concussion symptoms that wouldn't go away. And I had to learn completely new ways of managing my energy levels because when I pushed at the level I was used to pushing at, I would crash and I would crash for days. I had to learn how to tamp down on things, how to plan my day completely differently, very, very structured, and being very cautious about the different kinds of things I did and how much of those things I did. If I, for example, needed to go to the grocery store, which would be about an hour and a half of walking up and down the aisle, making a bunch of decisions, moving my head back and forth, things we all take for granted, dealing with the parking lot. Okay, we don't take that for granted. That would be a bit anxiety provoking in and of itself. But if I did that at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was done for the day. So I had to learn what I could and couldn't do and how to manage those things. And so obviously now when I'm better, it's not as big a deal, but you run the risk of these habits becoming more permanent than you need them. And then what happens is we struggle to change and we don't know why. That's the pattern that I see. And so, as I was starting to say before, the real problem isn't discipline, right? The real problem is you don't trust yourself after a while to know whether or not the old rule still applies. And so you might be saying, well, what if I need this protection again? You might not realize it, but that's what's going on inside. Or what if I'm wrong about being ready? So I gave you one example about my PCS recovery. Here's a few more to help you put this in perspective. For example, maybe there was a CEO that had a crisis in their company. People were leaving. Things weren't going the way they were supposed to be. They delegated a whole bunch of stuff out, and now suddenly they found themselves without the staff they're used to having, and it's a crisis, and they needed to rein everything in and control it. You went from your nice, diverse, diffuse, dispersed, that's the word, dispersed chain of command and tasks to now they need to do everything. But after having had that experience, now the CEO doesn't know how to actually delegate anymore because they forgot how to trust their judgment about other people, right? Or maybe there's an entrepreneur who has You know the statistic, right? 50% of all small businesses fail. Well, those of us that are entrepreneurs and serial business owners have had that experience more likely than not. If you have been an entrepreneur and you've been through one case where things did not go as planned, you may have learned to spend cautiously. And then you hit a point where even though you're making good money and you're financially stable, it's really, really hard to get yourself to invest in the growth and put the money out for the things you need. Another example might be an executive who learned in a toxic work environment that opening up and speaking out about things was really not a good idea because it always came back to bite them. They learned to stay silent. And maybe now, even in a new workplace with a healthy culture, they aren't able to speak up and they hold back a little bit. So these are just some examples of ways that we can find ourselves playing a little bit smaller than we would want to be, just because it's an old habit. It's something that we learned for a good reason, but we never got a chance to unlearn it, and now it's holding us back. And that's why I just need to change. I just need more discipline. I just have to do it. That thought process doesn't work and doesn't help, because usually what's getting in our way is a habit that we developed for a reason. And usually that reason was a good reason and it was protective in some way. And if you, maybe not your thought, but your being, thinks that changing will lead to danger, it will push back completely and will resist you with everything it's got. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but I know a lot of people that have. I know I've had it where it's just like no matter what we do, the thing I say I want and the actions that I'm taking, they're not aligned because there is something that is got a good reason to be there. And we need to get through and we need to undo those connections. Now, one of the things people don't realize, or maybe you do realize, but you haven't maybe thought about why, it's harder to unlearn and relearn something than it is to learn it right in the first place. I used to tell my students this all the time because kids will just go off on their own and practice. They'll kind of get the gist of it and it's good enough and I know it and they don't want to be told because they know. But if you learn to do a kick, for example, the wrong way, and then I have to reteach you, your body has to unlearn the wrong way and then relearn the right way. If we learn the right way the first time, it's easier. In the case where we have adopted a pattern or a habit that has a good, strong, protective purpose, we now need to unlearn that. I once had a neuroscientist explain to me that in layman's terms, so I'm guessing this is not technically what happens, not exactly what happens, but in a way that I can understand. When you do something like throw a punch or balance your checkbook or invest in something that's going to make your business bigger, you have neurons that fire. And the saying is what fires together wires together. And the image that I was given was you have like a like a stick or a branch. And every time you do something, the neuron takes a wrap around it, right? Because there's a connection that's being made. So you have this neuron firing, this neuron firing. We need to make a connection. And so a wrap gets made between the two. Like I need another finger, right? Like around the fingers, but it takes one wrap and it connects the dots. And then you do it again and it connects another dot. And you do it again and it connects another dot. That's what creates muscle memory. It's not really muscle memory. It's really a neuron connection. So imagine you had this experience, any one of the ones we were talking about before, like the CEO that controls everything and doesn't like to delegate. So they delegate something, it blows up in their face, it wraps. They delegate again and it blows up in their face again and another one wraps. And so during this period of crisis, all of these things kept happening that were reinforcing the belief that I can't delegate and it's not safe and I have to do everything myself. So if you want to change that, you now have this very strong connection that says bad. And so you need to unwrap, right? You need to create a new connection. And before you can create that new connection, you have to loosen this connection. So how do we do that? That's what I'm talking about with unlearning. It sounds great, but how do I do it? One thing to remember is we're not forcing anything. You can push through some kinds of injuries. You cannot push through a brain injury. And in a similar way, you cannot push through changing patterns that help. especially if you're not aware of them anymore. So this is not about forcing. This is about recalibrating what's true now. I think a lot of people would really like to put the COVID pandemic behind us. It's 2026. We're done with that. The truth is that was only 5 years ago. And we are still seeing in lots of places the impact that that massive change on our lives had. And I think some people would like to just put it away and move forward and pretend it never happened, or this is how I used to be before, I should be able to do it again. And, there are probably some people who can, and that's great. But then there are some people that it was a little bit more challenging and some decisions had to be made. And some of those decisions have now become subconscious, and we need to have an opportunity to dig those out. What we need to do to unlearn is we need to not force it. We need to trust the process. It's not going to happen overnight. Frustrating as that can be, it takes time to build new habits. Used to say it was 21 days. Then I heard it was 63 days. I'm not sure what the research says on any of that, but I know it takes time and it takes practice and it takes grace. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they want to go from 0 to 60. So someone says, I need to start meditating. And I say, great. How long do you want to meditate? I want to meditate an hour a day. Well, how much do you meditate now? I don't. Have you ever meditated before? No. How long can you sit still? Maybe 3 minutes. Okay, let's try meditating for 3 minutes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. 3 minutes. That makes sense. Great. How many days a week? 7. Okay. So if you set a 7-day-a-week goal and you miss one, what happens? You failed. So how about we have our goal and our stretch goal, right? Stretch 7, goal 5. You missed 2. That's great. We need to have some grace. We have to know there's going to be bumps along the road. We're going to not force it. We're going to trust the process, know it takes a while. And the other thing is we have to actually recognize the pattern. Some people don't even realize what's going on. On all these examples I gave you, people might not even realize what's going on. I certainly didn't know that I was getting anxious at Whole Foods because I was going like this and my brain didn't know what to do with it, and that I was making decisions and my brain was getting tired. And pretty much your brain gets exhausted and goes, not safe, and then you have anxiety. I didn't know that. Someone had to tell me that. And once I recognized that, I could deal with it. I knew what it served. So you need to recognize whatever pattern it is that you need to unlearn first. And then I highly recommend taking the time to think about what's the purpose that it was serving and find out whether or not you still need that. And if you don't need it, then you can give yourself something new to practice, a new belief that could take its place, a new way of looking at it. Also, I think planning for problems is always a good idea. Going back to that CEO that can't delegate, I wonder why this is what I keep coming back to. It's funny, that's my favorite example today. That CEO who can't delegate, they're going to try delegating and having a plan for when it goes wrong. If it goes wrong, this is what I'm going to do can help alleviate some of that anxiety and also will help you when something goes wrong because it always does. None of us are perfect. And then also remember to start small and build on each success. I think it was in the 4-Hour Workweek, Tim Ferriss book, the first time that I read the idea that when you want to give people more responsibility, you set limits that you're comfortable with. So for example, when I first started having an admin, I trusted these people, but I didn't want to give them my credit card and let them spend whatever they wanted to spend. I'd never done this before. So I said, okay, you have $100 limit. You can spend up to $100 up to your own discretion without asking me first, but anything over $100 I have to approve. Because that was what I could stomach losing, was $100. You scale that up as you go and to whatever it is you can manage, but start small and build on each success. So as we're wrapping up, I just want to remind you that if you're somebody who was in one of those seasons and you are struggling to unlearn, you're struggling with some habits that you feel like are not serving you anymore, just remember whatever got you here, if it's past, it's past. If you're still in it, honor it. And you need to kind of keep going with that. But if you're at the point where you're like, I don't need to play small anymore, I'm done, I'm out of survival mode, the crisis has passed, it's okay, it's past. And remember that. And also remember, you're not that person anymore. You're not the person who needed that rule. And it's okay to trust yourself again. So here's your one idea for the week ahead. I want to invite you to notice, what are you still doing that you no longer need to do? In whatever area of your life or business this applies to, what are you still doing that you no longer need to do? And once you've noticed it and identified it, ask yourself these three questions. One, what do you need to unlearn in order to let it go? Number two, what do you want to replace it with? Because you don't want to just unlearn it and leave yourself hanging. So, what's the idea or the habit or the process that you want to replace this thing you no longer need with? And then number three, what is the first best step that you could take toward that new thing? So that's your big idea for the week ahead. Have a wonderful, fantastic week. I will see you here next Sunday. Feel free to leave comments below if you're watching this on the replay. Also, there's a link somewhere down there how to reach me if you want to follow up with me about anything. Take care and have a wonderful week.